Hi everyone, David Cassidy from Spanish River Church, thanking you for joining me today for a little overtime in regard to this past Sunday's message and our devotional work this week. I'm going to ask you to take that devotional guide and turn to page 18. Just take a few minutes with you today to look at an important chart right at the bottom on movements and institutions. This week we're looking at bringing the good news of Jesus to the world. Matthew 28, Jesus tells us that we're to go into the world. As you are going into the world, be making disciples. We bring the good news to people. In a New York Times interview, Bob Dylan was asked why people didn't pay any attention to Little Richard's gospel music. Well, Dylan's answer is telling. Here's Dylan. Probably because gospel music is the music of good news, and in these days there just isn't any. Good news in today's world is like a fugitive, treated like a hoodlum and put on the run, castigated. All we see is good-for-nothing news, and we have to thank the media industry for that. It stirs people up, gossip and dirty laundry, dark news that depresses and horrifies you. On the other hand, the good news is exemplary. It can give you courage. You can pace your life accordingly. You and I are the people who bring good news to the world. And as we do that, we are called to make resilient disciples, those who become followers of Jesus. We baptize, we teach, and then these people become followers of Jesus. But as we do that, we call people into community to become part of a great movement of the gospel that's been going on for 2,000 years now. And that movement creates institutions like schools and hospitals and churches. Now, sometimes as we bring the good news to people, and we do so in the power of the Spirit, a kind of tension arises in some hearts between the fluidity of movement and the rigidity of institutions. And sometimes people who want to think more about the flow of the river can chafe with the structures that exist with the institution. And some people who are really concerned about the preservation of the institution can feel a little bit of fear and trepidation about the way in which the river flows so freely and so rapidly. But both are needed. It's true that movements of the gospel are very fluid. Institutions are rigid. The movement's more concerned about promulgation, reproduction. Let's get more out there. The institution's more concerned about preserving what's been given. The movement has a dynamism, and the institution's marked more by a kind of determination to maintain what's been entrusted to it. Movements are willing to cross boundaries. Institutions are committed to the preservation of the structure. Movements are there to create new initiatives which bring the good. And institutions exist to deepen the good, further the good, preserve the good, but both exist to glorify God. As we are going into the world, the tension for us is not between being part of a great movement of the gospel and creating institutions like schools and seminaries and churches. All of these are the outcome of the flow of the river of God's Spirit in the world. And so that's why, as a church, we are committed not simply to sharing the gospel personally, though we do that, but to planting churches, to creating institutions. That doesn't mean they'll always look like they have always looked. Churches will take different shapes. Seminaries, places where the ministers of the future are trained. Those programs will take different shapes. The modern seminary is something which has existed only for a couple of hundred years as it is. But whatever shape future institutions may take, we're not viewing them as contrary to the flow of the river of God's life in the Holy Spirit. And so as we depend on the Holy Spirit, as we trust Him to empower us to bring the good news of Jesus to everyone in our everyday life, that means we'll also be committed to planting new churches, helping new programs to emerge that train ministers, that help bring counseling and grace to people, doing the structural stuff, creating the schools, doing those things which preserve the good for generations to come. We need the flow of the river, and we need the structures that bring that life to bear across generations to come. Bob Dylan reminds us we've got good news, and our hearts can be more moved by that than the news cycle. Thanks, everybody.